All right. We are locked in. You are locked on. We are live. And this is Misaligned. Welcome back to another episode, another conversation, another interaction, another meeting of the minds. Tonight, we're pulling apart an interesting idea, that people get what they deserve. But does deserve actually have anything to do with it? I don't know. The idea that if you're rich, you've earned it. The idea that if you're poor, you failed. That reasonable? Is that the truth? Is there a comforting line that the winners of the system use to justify their own superiority in the position? And if life isn't fair, then I mean, should we even try to make it fair? Is there a good reason why life is unbalanced if it actually is, or should we just accept it and focus on the grind, just getting through from cradle to the grave? You know what I mean? It's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Job Cross. We miss Farouk again. I'm sure he'll be back with us soon. But thanks everyone for joining us. I think.
So should we just focus on the grind, just getting through from cradle to the grave? You know what I mean? It's all yours. Oh, got some feedback.
Hello, everyone. Job Cross.
No, you can carry on. I fixed it.
Right. Okay. Great. I wouldn't have known what to do with that, but good. We're back on track. Right. Does deserve have anything to do with it? And I think this is one of those topics where, it'd be interesting to see how people engage with this. I've got fairly formed views around this, and I'm happy to share those and to listen to others and engage with our audience. Do people deserve what they get? Does a billionaire deserve their wealth? And does a pauper and a drug addict under the bridge who, is homeless and doesn't get anything in life, do they deserve what they get? Is it because they didn't work hard enough, or just they didn't try in school? How do we make sense of this? Let's just kind of, jump into it. Opening thoughts. What are your views, Jab? As someone who kind of has a thing since I've known you for looking after the underdog, I suspect that you might have views that almost kind of protect and safeguard the underdog. But I'm not going to bias. I'm just going to say let's hear you out. You still there, Jab?
Yeah, I think we've got a bit of a delay with Jab. Jab, you need to mute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
I think we can now, yeah.
Yep.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we've got you.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, I think we've got network problem. Okay. It's quite glitchy.
We can hear you loud and clear.
I can hear you as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Do you wanna maybe log
I think
out?
I've lost you guys.
You wanna log out, log back in?
Okay, I'll try that.
Restart. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let me try that. Yeah.
Okay. So perhaps we can give Jab a minute.
Yep.
Whilst we just almost crystallize our own thoughts. Sorry, say again?
Yeah, we can chew on it while Jab comes in. And what was the prompt what's the question that you raised?
So I've just kind of painted two scenarios. Extra, you've got a billionaire on one end. He's got everything, the private yacht, more money than 10 generations would ever need. And you've got the drug addict on the other end who's under the bridge. He's got nothing, never had anything, never worked, never done anything. Do they both deserve what they get? The billionaire has got everything because they worked hard and they're smart. And the drug addict has got nothing because they're stupid and they haven't worked hard. Is it that simple?
I think this is one of those ones where if I had to choose, I would. Well, I mean, as with everything else and all these conversations that we've had over the past couple of months, there's always nuance. But if I want to ignore the nuance completely and say let's forget nuance and let's just pick a side, I'm going to go on the side of saying that yes, it's because no one deserves anything. Because success really doesn't have anything to do with your with what you deserve. It's more about what you've earned. Now, there's an argument about people who become billionaires shouldn't be able to hold on to their billions, or they should be taxed up to 90% of the wealth that they generate, etc. There's a few different economic arguments, sociocultural arguments, political arguments about this. And in my mind, I'm like, look, listen, the reality is these people have worked to get what they wanted to get. They've gotten it, and they, at quote unquote, at this point, they deserve the fruits of the labor. They don't deserve the fruits of somebody else's labor. They don't deserve the fruits of thoughts, effort, hard work that was put in by others. They deserve what they've put into the system. They've reaped, and so they sow. Now, even though what they sow might seem to be unfair, it is a characteristic of the world in which we live. The reality is that the world is a world of tilling. We till the soil, we plant seeds, we let them grow, we water them, we weed them, we add fertilizer to that soil, we build and we grow. And then the results and the outcomes that we get are as a result of our hard work. Now, if a farmer goes and tills and sows the entire, farmland, etc., someone comes and says, no, your fruit is too much. You have too many, you have too many apples, too many mangoes, you have too many pieces of yam, etc., and they start curtailing that. What does that mean? For them. On the flip side, and I'll be very quick because I jab your back, and you've probably got a few, thoughts on this one. On the flip side, I don't think we should allow people to live in absolute poverty. I think letting penury become part of society, where the people who are in abject poverty and dealing in inhumane conditions, is probably not right. There's a limit on that as well. I think that there's a point, because I've seen some elements of people abusing, particularly in the UK, the social system. But I still think we need to have some kinds of nets, which will be supported by taxing those people who are rich without setting limits on them or preventing them from wanting to do more.
Thank you very much, Cross. I accept your argument largely, apart from one flaw that I see in it, which I consider a core fundamental flaw. I'll come back to it, and I'll press you on that. But because Jab was going to speak and we lost him for a moment, I think it's only fair for us to just let him go with his opening thoughts. But I've got the challenge for you that we'll come back to, Cross. Jab. Right. Jab's looking stunned. I'm not sure he can hear.
Can you hear?
Yep.
Yes. Go for it.
I mean, it's a very bad line on my end here. You guys are just breaking all the time, and it's quite glitchy. But if you can hear me, I think I'll make my contribution. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Hello?
You might want to restart your internet. That might help.
Can you hear me? My screen is frozen.
There we go. Yeah, you're back now.
You guys have stopped moving. Can you?
We can hear you though, so your video is moving normally for me, and I can hear you normally.
You can, okay.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's quite tricky because I can't. The screen is frozen. I can't get any reaction from you. But hello.
Yes,
we're here. If you carry on, just assume that we can hear you. Just go on.
Just go ahead.
Right. Okay. I think. Yes, it's frozen. Frozen completely.
Okay, restart your internet.
If you can hear me, I'll make my contribution.
Okay, go ahead. Well, just go ahead.
So, sorry. Did you say I should go on? Okay, well,
yes, just go
I presume
ahead.
You can hear me, so I'll make this contribution. So this morning, Arnold...
You've gone.
Uh-oh.
Lost you. Okay, so I think we're going to let Jobs sort his internet out. But Cross, so what I gathered from what you said, you took those two scenarios and you kind of painted a picture of how one thing leads to another, which I agree with. So, someone stumbles onto an invention or, something they've been thinking about all their lives, and, they get a breakthrough, they work hard at it, it produces results, and they become a billionaire. Well and good. They deserve what they get. I think the challenge to you there is you've removed a core part of what's happening there. Okay, which is that for you to obtain, deserve anything in life, it passes through an intermediary, as I see it. And that intermediary is society itself, and how society decides to value and reward things, right? So the idea
Okay.
that, and that's a fact, right? Again, I'll explain what I mean. So the idea that Taylor Swift can can come to do a European tour and gross something close to like, don't quote me on this, but I gather something close to like $2 billion, right, on a
Yeah, she's
European
a
tour.
billionaire. Yeah.
Yes, and that this is entirely due to her. No, it's also due to value systems of society. It's how the value that we place on the music and the entertainment that she provides. So it's a two-way street. Okay, she can never be who she is without the rest of us who pay. Mind you, I don't go to a Taylor Swift show, but I use the term we as a collective. So it's down to the rest of us who admire the music, who pay for it, who talk about it, and who also function as agents to make this happen. So the bus drivers who take people to the shows, and the stage engineers, the IT people, the security officers who make all of this happen, right?
Yeah.
There's no Taylor Swift without any of these people, right? So the question we should be asking is, granted, she deserves some remuneration and some compensation for everything she's done and for making people that excited, right? But having said that, it's still up to society to set what the charge is, right? That's a given, right? We set the charge, and we do that whether we do it actively or we do it passively. It's been done all the time. So the question I ask all the time, certainly from the millionaire's point of view, is I am sure we can have a conversation. Again, I'm not in a position to set where the line should be drawn on any particular occasion. What I am saying is the huge extremes are not good for society. Okay, so on the one hand, you have people who can't feed and who don't, they don't have any shelter, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. But on the other hand, you have people who have more money than 10 generations will ever of their families will ever need, right? And so you say, this is not right, okay? And I'm not sure where the line is, but I'm sure this is not right. And I think that's an open conversation that society can have. I don't think anyone in a vacuum deserves those hundreds of billions. Neither do I think anyone deserves to be sitting under the bridge. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's an easy answer to this. I know that this is complex, and I think we'll get to that shortly, because you have to, in order for you to get people up from their bed in the morning to go to work and think and work hard, invent, you have to have a system of incentives, and you have to be careful not to take that away. So I'm not oblivious of that. I'm not saying just take away everything from the rich and give it to the poor and we'll be fine. We're not going to be fine if you do that, because you'll grind the system to a halt. But what I am saying is, on a fundamental basis, and we will get into the morality of this shortly, but on a fundamental basis, I approach the world with the understanding that it belongs to all of us. And so if you think about a family, for example, and if you say, people who work hard and who have huge talent, they deserve what they have. In a sense, yes. In another sense, no. So think about yourself as a parent who's got a very large family, right? You've got lots of children, and one of them or another of them has, this skill or talent, they can make lots of money, and there's another one who maybe is not as commercially talented as the other one. So again, I use my language very carefully. So you're talking about people who have different talents. Some are more sort of commercially viable than others, and you're not going to hope as a parent to create a situation in the family where, certainly whilst they're still under your care, where one of them is just so much better off than the other. You're just not going to do that. Well, I think it's unlikely you would. You'd find a way to nurture their talents whilst also still making them not too far apart with regards to what they have access to in life, the comforts of life, the securities of life. And I think this is the challenge that I put to people, that I say, if you're going to do that in a family, what stops you doing that in a, or at least aspiring towards that in a larger family?
I disagree. I disagree with your proposition in that first place. Jab's back, so he's probably going to have a view. But let me just throw something in really quickly on this, and this is the part where I say that people don't necessarily deserve anything. So if I had, 3, 4 children, right? I mean, people often use the story of the prodigal son. So if you're watching this at some point, it's a Christian parable about the rich man who had a number of kids, and one of the kids said, "Give me all my inheritance. I'm going to go out to go spend it all, etc." He took all his money, went out, became broke, came back home, said, "Daddy, please take me back." Daddy came back, brought him back, threw a huge party. The other son that was there was saying, "Daddy, what the hell? Why are you doing this? Why are you still celebrating him when he's gone out and just burnt everything?" And the father said something to the effect of, "Everything I have now is yours. Therefore, we're still celebrating the son that's come back." I think that's a pretty good example of what I consider to be important about these kind of situations. I think that parable, I know probably Jones is going to be sat there somewhere thinking and saying, "Hey, Cross, you're using the Bible again." I can use it literally. I can use it, as a literary source of information. But the concept for me in this one is that at the end of the day, within the prodigal son parable, the other son who hadn't utilized and burnt and expended all of his inheritance still had everything. They threw a tiny little party for him. But when his inheritance comes, he's going to have everything. And that other son, the same one that was celebrated when he came back, the herald who came back with the sign and the symbols of success and happiness and celebration, etc., would probably still be back on the streets. We didn't talk about that part of that in the parable, but that's the reality of life. And this is the part where I talk about it's not about what you deserve, it's about what it is that you do with what you have and what you get. So this is the part where we start coming back to the conversation we've had before in a previous episode, where we talked about equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, where we talk about equity, or we talk about general opportunity. And I think it's quite important to separate these two things. When we start thinking about what people deserve, especially from a state of lack, people who don't have a thing or don't have resources, don't have income, etc., it is not incumbent on me as someone who has put the work, the effort, etc., in to ensure that that person has a standard of living that's up to a certain level without them also putting in commensurate work. They also have to work.
It is incumbent on you.
Not if they're not putting in the effort. They have to put in the effort. I'm not going to sit down, and obviously the extenuating circumstances. So I'm not going to talk about. I'm not talking about people who are disabled. I'm not talking about people who are about babies or or older people, elderly people, etc. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a fully capable individual who is sat there, same age as me, same energy as me, same mental capabilities in terms of being able to deliver in society, etc. To some degree, a regular able-bodied human should not be subsidized by others. If somebody else has been able to acquire wealth through diligence, hard work, conscientiousness, lots of extroversion, competence, capability, eyeing the opportunities and taking advantage of them, utilizing the network, focusing on education, etc., that person should not be required to go and subsidize the other person.
How do you define able-bodied, though?
Able-bodied is, for me, really, the able-bodied is being able to do what the average person can. That's just simply what it is. So if you take all 8 billion people in the world, you line them up in a row, and then you put them based on ability to, from infancy to old age, and basic capability. Incapability on both ends, the most capable person being somewhere on that spectrum. The person in the middle, the one who is just average. What can the average person do? The average person can lift about 61 kilograms in weight. For bench lift, they can deadlift about 70 kilograms, I think. And I can't remember what the other one was for the other exercise. But that's the average person.
So you would make allowance for people that are significantly deviated
unable to. Yes, people who are, and I think this is an important thing, because I'm not a full-on capitalist who says, well, if you're disabled, that's too bad, that's your business. No, I'm not that. I don't believe in that. I think those who are unable to contribute to society to a full capacity, because in most cases, most people can still contribute in some way. people who have physical disabilities more often than others can contribute in a mental capacity. So people who have mental disabilities can often contribute in physical capabilities, etc. And I think we can also make some allowance for that and reduce the expectations in terms of what we expect them to contribute to society through taxes, national insurance, etc. But we should be willing to use taxes and other kinds of societal pooling funds, essentially through taxes, etc., like I've already mentioned, to support those. But it should only be for those able-bodied individuals, someone who just sat down there and just chilling and playing video games all day and just not doing anything, should not be given that same platform, that floor, as somebody else who is unable to. So someone who doesn't want to should not be treated the same way as someone who's unable to. That's my own view about it.
Okay, we'll come back to that because of the flag that I just want to plant there before we go to Jab is that someone who's not willing to, someone who's not able to, good luck being able to draw a fine line between those. And I think if you ask anyone who does any work, DWP, Department of Works and Pensions, or people who work with disabled or out of work people, they tell you how notoriously difficult it is to draw a line between those, and there's good reasons for that. There's good reasons for that. But we're 20 minutes in. We haven't heard from Jab.
Yeah. Okay. No. Thank you for your patience. Sorry, so I've had really bad computer glitch. I can
Looks
hear
like
you
it's
very
all
well.
sorted now.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. I hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So I don't know what has been said, but my own initial thoughts are this. So, I think that, in conversations with colleagues over the years, I find that people give you the impression that they are where they are because of their efforts. And there's some truth to that. I don't think it's all. Yes. So, they are self-made. They're self-made is because they work, they've worked hard, and that's why they are where they are. And this is quite common actually when you go sort of like, on doctors groups and maybe people who are a bit, affluent, middle class. And this conversation usually comes up when you talk about benefit scroungers, because people think, oh, these people deserve, they are milking the system, they are abusing the system, and therefore, why are they where they are? It's because they haven't worked as hard as I have. Essentially, that is kind of where the kind of context that these conversations has often come up. And I have said on a lot of these things, which is that it's not entirely true, because in the Western capitalist system, all of us are literally 1 or 2 paychecks away from going and benefit, because that's just how the system has been structured. It's all structured around debt. So, your car, your house, everything is all debt, right? Loans, if you want to call, but basically debt. And, if you didn't have a paycheck or two for whatever reason, and you didn't have the right insurance, you would probably end up being on benefits. And there are people who come from, Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, that I know, who have to do 2, 3 jobs, often single parents, kid is at home. So they go from one shift to the other just to try and make ends meet. So if you're talking about effort, these people have put on the work. They've put in the work. And another example I might use, maybe a very crude one, is think about the transatlantic slave trade. If you're saying that effort is the same thing as, for use of a better word, prosperity, no one worked harder than a slave, but their efforts are exploited and someone else gets rich. So in the capitalist system, what you find is the people who actually do the least amount of work make the most amount of effort. You just need to know how to exploit the system. But I want to go a bit more fundamental than that. And what I have in mind is, at birth, when you think about it, even at birth, it's not a clean slate, because you are a product of the genes that you have inherited. If your mother was an alcoholic, for instance, and you end up with an alcohol fetal syndrome, for instance, you're already disadvantaged from get-go. If you've got, let's say, Down's syndrome, chromosomal abnormalities, you're already, disadvantaged from that point of view. And then you get born into a system. You can think of maybe, let's say, somebody who's born in somewhere in a remote village somewhere in Africa, no light, no electricity. The odds against you are just so massive compared to somebody who was born, let's say, in Buckingham Palace, for instance. The differences are stark, and for those two individuals, it's the privileges or disadvantages are things that are just there. They were born into this thing. So for that reason, I think that it's not an even field. And so now the conversation that I met you and Yemi making cross, I think, is one about values, I think. So with that background, so that's where I'm coming from. So with that, I kind of feel like the purpose of government, I know that we've had these conversations in previous podcasts where I have said that I agree that it's a value judgment, because Yemi was picking me up on this and saying, who decides whether a government should work in the interest of the many? So for me,
So just to say,
you
I
have to
didn't
unmute
disagree.
yourself.
Sorry, I didn't disagree with you at all on that. What I disagreed with was your co-opting your values into the definition. So you and I actually agree on what a government should be doing. What we don't agree with is that what we think the government should be doing should now be incorporated into the standard definition of a government. I don't know if I'm making sense there, because words have meanings, right? And I might say my car should be used to take my child to school. Fine, and you and I might agree about that, but that's not inherent in the definition of a car. Someone else's car might be to go to a nightclub, and they're still cars.
Well, no, that's a small issue, but I think we were discussing democracy on that day, and I was saying that. Well, I think we'll leave that. But I think
I agree with you. Just to say, I agree with you. What government should be doing.
Okay, good. So for me, because of this understanding, I feel that a government should do the most for the most number of people, should do the best for the most number of people. I think you need to look at these inherent disadvantages and try and see if you can level the field, as it were, and look after the people who have these disadvantages, because we're only here for the human experience. I don't know if you live maybe to 100 years, you've done really well. So we're only here for like a very short time, and I think that whilst we're here, we need to try and make the experience as worthwhile and as pain-free and as good and humane as we can for humans. So I don't know if that's what you guys have been talking about since.
I think you've spoken very well, Jab. In fact, I'm aligned with everything you've said. I think everything. I think everything I'd say on this matter going forward will be different ways of saying what you said, frankly. But I'd be interested in hearing what Cross disagrees with about that, and we can take it forward. What is it that Jab has said?
Is a capitalist. I agree with everything.
Yes. What has Jab said tonight that you disagree with?
So there's a couple of things that have been raised. Of course, you know me. I like to make sure I cover all the bases, right? So the first thing is around what we talked. Well, I'll just quickly touch on your point that you raised earlier. I mean, we could come back to that again. But the first thing was around unable to work versus unwilling to work, and I understand that that's a standard challenge or a standard problem. And I think the issue with that tends to come up with how socialism allows itself to be. So if there is a lot more rigorous testing in terms of like means testing through more standardized approaches to means testing. So, for example, a simple thing that tends to work with and you should both know this anyway. It shouldn't be anything new to either of you. Would be physiological tests. So when you get on the treadmill, is a good example to say, get on that treadmill. Let's see how much you can run, and then where do you fall when you run through that. The different scales to assess your physiological health. That's just one example of standardized tests that could be utilized to be able to check whether people are able to do certain things or not. And there will be a point where it becomes disability. If it's not disability, go find a job, right? I can also agree with the things that Jab said earlier about short-term, the reality of short-term or transient unemployment, as they call that in economics, which can happen to anyone. Like to your point as well, the UK and most Western countries as well work within a system where most people tend to be paycheck to paycheck, essentially, and they're quite close to it. But that doesn't stop them from being able to move between jobs. The average person in the UK, last I checked, I don't want to say the wrong number because I'm thinking about a number of different countries, but it's somewhere around 3 to 5 years. It's been shortening over the past couple of years, so that it's still able to find jobs. And that's fine. You can support them through jobs, but there should be a time limit in terms of when that support would last. There are people that have been on benefits for 18 years. I specifically know one person that's been on benefits for 18 years, and all she's done is just have kids, which to me is a complete abuse of the system. So, but to the disagreements I have with Jab's points specifically was one thing that you talked about there, and you did an appeal to extremes, which I found quite interesting because, I mean, Jab, you know this. You're doing the philosophical argument here, of you're comparing the work that the slaves have done, to and saying that they've worked really hard. It's like, well, at the end of the day, in economics and just generally in the world, let's not even go into specific economic definitions or just specific definitions. It's just in this world, value does not equal effort, because that's what you just try to do. You try to equate effort to value. You can work all you want digging up dirt, and you can dig it and keep digging all the dirt on the side of the some random side of the street. All you want, put all that effort into it. No one's going to pay you for that because there's no value. At the end of the day, if you direct your efforts into things that provide value to people, they will reward you with whatever the economic currency is at the time. Whether it's traded by barter, they're going to give you all their cows, they're going to give you all the meats, all the shoes, the cobblers, they're going to fix up all your shoes, etc. If you're providing something to all of them that provides value. If you're just putting in work for the sake of putting in work, you won't get value. So I think that's an important thing to just point out. So when you mention a couple of people who have come over from different countries, they come from Congos, they come from different parts of Africa, etc., and then they're working really hard, working 2-3 jobs, you need to ask the question and saying, the work that you're doing, what value is that providing to society? And do you need 2-3 jobs rather than focusing on the one job and one capability that can provide 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 times the value?
Maybe. Sorry to interrupt, but maybe you and I, to an extent, I agree with you. But I think you're stretching that argument, and maybe you might be able to tell me what value stockbroker, speculators and currency speculators add to the economy.
I can go into that in a second.
That make them worth the millions that they earn. Not that I disagree with you fundamentally on what you're saying, but I think you're stretching that principle a little bit too far.
And also the slave driver, what value does he add?
He controls this. He drives the slaves. And he drives the slaves, which that's his value. That's why it's going to be significantly more valuable than the actual slaves themselves. It's the truth, and it's a very harsh reality about what it is. The slaves themselves were not as valuable unless they were particularly strong, particularly tall, particularly XYZ, which was useful to whatever activity that was valuable that they'd be assigning those slaves to. So it wasn't just being a slave in itself. The effort required was not necessarily important. It's what activity were they being employed in. Employment is a bit of a stretch, obviously, but that they were being utilized for at that time. So I think.
Sorry, let me explain slightly what I mean. Okay, so you've got a group of slaves who are on the farm, engaging in economic activity. They've been exploited because they're not being paid. Someone holds a whip and he is, whipping them but he's let's say getting paid for that. Or let's say maybe say it's the guy who owns the farm, the guy who owns the plantation, who's put these people there. In terms of effort and work, what work is he doing to be so rich other than exploiting the people who are actually doing the job?
That's the work that he's doing that's providing value. Even though, again, I'm not saying it's correct or it's wrong. I'm being completely agnostic from a moralistic
You're
viewpoint.
you're looking at it from an amoral point of view.
Completely immoral. Yes.
Right. So, but let us have a look at this, and it ties us in the next segment about, and I think that's what Jab's getting at, and you as well, Cross. What fairness means, okay? Because I think this is where we need to move away, and we had this conversation a few days ago where I think someone posted a video on a group, and there was I've forgotten this guy's name, but he's a guy who I think is a neuroscientist and a philosopher who was talking about how facts relate to values. Didn't use the word value, but what he said was that, if you want to build, the example he used about how if you want to build an atomic bomb, right, you need the people who know all the facts about how to do that tend to get ruled by the people who can tell stories, right? Yeah. And that's what happens. So the people who are good at telling stories and mobilizing people around the stories will then boss that story over the people who have the facts to be able to do whatever, build an atomic bomb, go to space, anything. And that's how the world works. So what I am saying to you, and the challenge I'm putting to you going to the second part of this, is exactly the same. Because I think we can spend all day analyzing the facts of the matter about, if you put X in, you get Y, and what the data shows. Oh, well and good. I'm not going to sit here and, die on the heel of what the data says. What I am saying to you, though, is there is a value judgment that one makes reasonably to say, and I did make this point when Jab was away, so I'll see, I suspect you didn't hear it, I'll just make it again, that the whole X leads to Y in the world of commerce has to pass through the value system. So the only reason gold is as expensive as it is because
people value it.
Yes. So and that value has something to do with our collective perception of it, that are the meanings that we have come to ascribe to it. So what I am saying to you is that is always open to our general engineering, how we decide to value things. So when Taylor Swift shows up in Europe and she goes around and grosses $2 billion, again, don't quote me on that figure, but I suspect it was something like that, $2 billion on a tour. That is because of the value we collectively place on her music, on her person, and that then ties into the value that everyone else provides. The bus drivers who take people to and fro there, the security personnel, the engineers, the stage masters, the ambulance crew attend the shows. Like, everyone's keen into that value. And what I am saying to you is that there's a debate to be had. I don't know where the line is supposed to be drawn. I'm not pretending to, but I'm sure that there's a debate to be had about how we retweak the value that's placed on this, not just necessarily for people to rethink it, but how do we channel the value created out of it? Should it all go to one person at the top, or should we reimagine ways of how this pyramid should work? I put it to you that the way the pyramid works today is probably overskewed to one side. And I think there's an open debate about how we do this, because there's no Taylor Swift show if this hundreds of thousands of different people don't ascribe value to it, contribute to it, and if the millions of people who bought those tickets didn't. I don't see why one person should.
So the answer to this, is very simple. It's a very simple answer, right? Is that if you remove Taylor Swift, would those people buy those tickets?
Yes, you will simply just get another artist. So this is what's going to happen.
Would you get the X? I don't know how many. Let's just use a random. Let's use the number you. It's not a real number, arbitrarily thrown out, 2 billion. Do you think that if you just remove Taylor Swift and
what
then you just
will get is another artist?
Hold on. No, let's leave any artist. Let's just take out all the artists. Let's just remove. I'm not adding anyone. I'm not replacing. I'm just removing Taylor Swift. Do you think those people are even going to generate the income that they're making now with Taylor Swift?
So I think that argument is an interesting one, because it's an irrelevant argument, because if you remove I'll explain to you. I'm willing to explain it to you. It's not funny at all. So if you remove Taylor Swift, are these people going to generate it? Of course they're not. Okay, you remove the sound engineers and see what Taylor Swift makes of it.
She'll
I'm
be
not sure what
fine.
you're saying. No, she won't.
If Taylor Swift still, the impact in terms of the
You're
revenue,
just going to get
will
another
not be as
sound engineer,
significant.
right? You're just going to get another sound
No,
engineer.
no. She might not even need a sound engineer. Taylor Swift might be able to go with the sound off, because we've had situations like this that have happened with musicians going there and going full on a cappella for one. So there's no sound coming through the sound systems, etc. There are some people who go and just sing on this, just out there on the roads, etc. The income generated, and this is the
So
part
you
I'm talking
can
about the value.
generate, generate
hold on.
£2 billion
Let me
just
let me
singing a
that's
cappella on the
what I'm
road
trying to
without
explain.
sound engineers.
Wait, that's what I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to say that Taylor Swift on her own, if she goes on the side of the streets and she says, I'm selling a ticket, she's already Taylor Swift. And she says, I'm going on the side of the street.
She became Taylor Swift because of all of these people through her pathway. This is what you're missing.
But she said
Taylor Swift didn't fall from heaven.
I know, but she's Taylor Swift.
She's had all this input all of her life before she became Taylor Swift.
I know, but she's Taylor Swift now. So
no,
if she goes,
you cannot discount what has happened before
let me
now.
You cannot
pretend like it never happened.
No, but I'll explain that as well, because Taylor Swift was not grossing as much revenue now as she was grossing before. So as a result of the value that those people added to her, she's able to command the prices. And I agree. I'm not disagreeing with that. I know. That's what I'm trying to. I agree with you on a lot of things. But
Taylor Swift will not even make any headway without a record label. What are you talking about?
I agree. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. That's not relevant to the point. But the point is that now, because she 10 years ago, she would not be, even with the first record label, whenever she started, she was not generating this much that she was generating now in her current tour. She's able to generate that now. Now, if Taylor Swift, let's assume that she made 2 billion. Let's use 2 billion as just a random number to just use and say that was the thing. If you take Taylor Swift out of that and you only have the sound engineers, you have the stage people, you have all the lights and the fancy stuff, and you've just taken out Taylor Swift, right? That place is going to generate zero. This is not even like they're not going to generate.
So it will generate zero on that day. But I can put it to you that if
you replace, they can get somebody else.
So let me give you the
I'm not
example.
about replacement. Wait. I want to land the whole hypothetical, right? So if you remove Taylor Swift from that place, from that event, from that location, and you don't replace her with anybody else, that place will generate zero. Here's a bunch of sound engineers.
But we can easily replace her with someone else.
But I know there's a reason why I'm using the hypotheticals. We're talking about value, right? This is the key thing we're talking about value. And we can even use that, but that's a secondary argument. We could come to that as well, but that's secondary. You could replace her, but you're probably going to get less revenue because of the value. But I don't want to get into that point yet. I just want to deal with the absolutes, with the clear-cut concepts. So if you remove Taylor Swift, zero. No one's going to buy any tickets. No tickets sold. They're going to make no money. There's a bunch of very interesting studio designers here, stage designers, lighting people. It's all fancy. It's all great. No one's going to buy any tickets.
You have succumbed to a lie.
Wait. Let me succumb
to a fantasy.
Wait. But and I can give you examples because this happened numerous times. If you take out everybody else, and that's today, and you just put Taylor Swift on the side of the street, and she's busking, she gets her own microphone. And she buys a system, and it's Taylor Swift of today, not of 10, 15 years ago. Today. And she sits on the side of the streets and hold on, and then she puts a mic and she puts a sound system on the floor. And she says, I'm selling tickets now for £20, £50 just to come on lineup. That street will be packed.
Let me tell you. Let me.
Sorry, 1 second. Let him land. Hear me 1 second. Let him land. Okay. Yeah. So what's your point then? My
point is, and even with the hundreds of millions she will make, it might not be that coordinated 2 billion, because that 2 billion is coordinated efforts and impact and delivery of a multitude of people to use Taylor Swift to create value.
That's why she doesn't need to take. That's why she doesn't need to take the lion's share.
I'm about to land. But it does explain why she takes lion's share. But the point I'm making with this is that there are certain people and certain things that generate value. If you take them out of it, or if you try to assume that the value is automatically equal to everybody else that's contributed any kind of input to that thing, you're eliminating one of the reasons, first of all, that we even have generated wealth, generated progress as a society to move forward to where we are. The reality is value tends to stick within very, very small pockets of society. 5% of Kenya's wealth, is Kenya specifically I'm talking about. 95% of Kenya's wealth is in 5% of the Kenyan population. We looked at, you know, in our chat, we're talking about Europe, weren't we? Was it London where we're talking about? We're looking a little bit about wealth distribution. About 10%, right? Yeah, go on.
Okay, so we've got Taylor Swift. Let's pick an artist from Nigeria. Okay, until recently, maybe we were not quite there. Maybe Nigeria is not a good example. Let's take a random
Burna Boy.
artist.
Take Burna Boy.
Okay. Let's say. No, I want to just use. Okay, let's take Burna Boy. Let's assume he wasn't. So let's take Burna Boy, or a less well-known artist.
Okay.
Of comparable talent
to
Taylor Swift, right? But that individual is not going to generate that much money. Is your argument then that Taylor Swift is generating that much because of her talent, or what is it?
Because of her value. So I'm not associating.
Where does this value come from?
It doesn't matter what the value. It doesn't matter where the value comes from. So Chanel bags. I'll tell you. Let me explain this. So Chanel bags are a good example, or any of these designer bourgeoisie bags, right? They're a classic example of that. Birkin bags are a good example. £15,000 for a bag. Where is the value in that bag?
I can tell you the value comes from the propaganda that follows it. That's all. I can tell you where the value comes from. It's not
propaganda. It's not propaganda. When you use propaganda, it means
of course it is.
Not.
Of course it is.
It's not. Because I'll give you an example.
You just asked the rhetorical question of where does the value come from, because you recognize that there's no real value in it.
No, but there is, because value is whatever others place on an object.
I'm just trying to get to. Do you remember when Trump put his tariff on China?
Yep.
And then suddenly all these Gucci bags and all of those things that people buy maybe for like £1,000. There were all these videos of Chinese people saying we actually make these things for like a fraction of that amount of money.
I've known it for ages. Yeah.
Okay. So same bag. I think it goes back to Yemi's point because it's the propaganda. Because that's
the propaganda that turns into 20K. No, that's what turns into 20K. It's the propaganda.
But in terms of value, we just told you that amount. It's only made for a couple of I don't know, maybe
okay.
£20 is what they it's actually valued at.
What does propaganda mean? What does propaganda
mean? Means that you follow the product with a story, a narrative, that's all it is. All of us do propaganda. Did I deny that I do propaganda? Of course I do. But that's the only way to get your message across. You have to. So I am not denying that I even that's, my idea.
No. So we need to use the right words. So propaganda generally deals with misleading information that's of a political nature. We can check the exact definition.
Misleading information that this bag that is produced for 2K is worth 20K.
Nobody cares. Nobody's. Listen, no one is buying a Birkin bag saying, "Oh, this bag was calculated and the cost of production was 13K, so I'm buying it for 15K." No, they're buying it because it's Birkin. That's it. They're buying it Chanel because it's Chanel.
Let me say something about a program that I was watching recently. Okay, so lots of these luxury brands. Okay. One of what they do is that they mostly almost never sell their products at discount prices. So
it's a segue. I just got a message that it's just a message about the Taylor Swift thing, which I like this one. Taylor Swift reportedly paid a total of $197 million in bonuses to her Eras tour performers and crew on top of their regular salaries. These bonuses were given to a wide range of workers, including truck drivers, caterers, instrument technicians, merchandise team, and the various production staff. This gesture was revealed as the Eras tour concluded in Canada on December 8th, 2024, which she didn't have to do because they did not provide that much value, but she did it.
Okay. Can I say something about this?
Of course.
So lots of the luxury brands, okay, one of what they do that I saw in a documentary recently, they almost never sell their products at discounts. So, and there's a reason for that, okay, because when you sell the product at a discount, you devalue it in the eye of people. Okay,
Yeah.
so you want to maintain. So rather than sell it at a discount, they incinerate it. They go burn it. They will make the money back on the inflated prices of the new ones that they make. Right?
Yep.
If this is not propaganda, you tell me what it is. So this
How is it?
just let me land. So this is a way of controlling the narrative around something in a very tight way, using all kinds of trickery. That's all it is. And I'm not
How is it
begrudging them.
trickery?
No. Of course, it is
Can
trickery.
I
I'm
give
not.
another example?
I'm not begrudging them for doing that, but I'm just
No,
pointing
but
out
how
to
is
you
it
because
trickery? I mean, the words you're
you
using.
asked me, it is trickery. You asked me where does the
How?
value come from? That is where the value comes from. In case you've never known, this is
No,
how
but I
the
understand
value
this. So
is
you're talking about supply and demand.
curated.
So
Classic
the value,
economic theory.
the value comes from the narrative, and this is what we're talking about: story, right? This is why storytelling is very
Yeah.
important. It comes from narrative. That's all it is. Because that bag is worth £20 in terms of, if you look at all the, just random example, let's assume it was worth 20 pounds. So by that I'm meaning, if you take into account the skin or whatever product, the base skin, you've paid the workers, you've paid everybody, it's worth £20. But then you're selling it for, let's say, £2,000, or
2000.
maybe,
Yeah.
okay, so £2,000. So where that value there, it's the story that you created. That's the thing that has brought about.
And you're creating that story to sustain a class system, right? So there's a deliberate, you want to separate. Again, I've seen this about airlines where they say they deliberately, so when they, again, this is not, you can call it conspiracy theories, but I've read some sort of credible information around this, that they sit down and say you can't make the economic class too comfortable. You
Yeah, of
have
course.
to
Because you want to force upgrade.
deliberately punish the poor to be able to
Well, no,
extract
it's
the
not
rich.
punish the poor.
No. Again,
No.
this is figurative language. It's figurative language. Again, sometimes you use this language. What am I supposed to say? Is this figurative
No,
language?
I think the word you're looking for is incentivize the rich.
No.
Is what it
I
is.
think no. I think
That's what it is.
No,
The poor get
punishing
transportation.
the poor. I
The
think
poor get
punishing the poor
transportation.
here is more appropriate. In fact,
No,
so
it's not. It's not. I disagree. I just
it is.
disagree.
You're making a group of travelers more uncomfortable than you need to make them be.
Yes.
In order to make
incentivize
those
them,
who have money in the bank to be more willing to say, "I don't want to do that."
or the people who don't have money in the bank to take loans or to go take out credit cards. It's the same concept. Yeah, I know. I get that. But again, there's nothing wrong with that.
So that's where the value comes from. Again, when you think about this value, it's carefully curated in boardrooms. This is what I'm telling you.
No,
right?
but again, no, I'm sorry. What you're saying doesn't map onto reality. I understand what you're trying to say.
It does.
No, but it doesn't. So because what you're talking about is standard economics. This is
okay. I think we're given too many examples. Maybe we stick with one and just analyze it for the moment.
Standard economics.
So, Cross, let me understand this. What you're saying is, if you make the standard economic class a bit uncomfortable than you need to, such that people then end up paying a bit more to get to, to become a bit more comfortable. You could have made it comfortable. You could have just made the economy class comfortable.
Yeah, but then
you want more money. So
economic flex. And then the economic flex is less comfortable than business. Because so what would happen is if you make it less comfortable,
it goes back to what we're talking about. You deliberately make the economy class a bit
less
uncomfortable.
Not uncomfortable,
so
less comfortable than it's less comfortable
yes,
than premium economy.
But why are you doing that? The reason you're doing that is because
it generates income, and to provide, again, it depends on what people value. So if people value, and this is the important part as well. This is the thing. If people value comfort, they will pay for it. That's why they make it less comfortable, because people value it. Now, if people didn't value comfort and just thought, I don't care, I just want to get, it's like Molue. Let's just think about Molue and downfall buses in Nigeria. You know what I mean? People who squash and squeeze themselves into the buses, and they don't care. They're not thinking about comfort. They want to get from A to B.
In
But
fact,
then
in fact, those people care. They just can't afford the
it's
more.
the same concept. At that point, they're
They
like, I
do.
want to get to A to B. If they really, 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 really cared about it to that point, they will do additional things to generate the income that's required to be able
No,
to get there.
sometimes some of them are doing everything they can flat out. They just
Fine,
can't
some of them. I'm
generate
just saying,
income.
I'm talking about the average person. In general, most people who get into Molowe and stuff like that is generally because that's the level.
Most UK nurses can work themselves flat out all they care. They will not be able to afford business class air travel in most cases.
Yeah, but okay. Business class is pushing again. It comes back to no, but again, it comes back to what do they value? If they really value it, they'll go and they'll take loans. And they will not buy a car. They won't
use food banks.
Sorry.
So we have NHS nurses who have to use food banks.
What's the average AFC ban for an NHS nurse today?
Yeah, I think that might be a little bit of a
pushing it here a little bit, right?
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a dramatic.
It's pushing that a little bit. You can't tell me, you can't tell me that one. I'm not going to chop it because I work to NHS too. So I know what it is. It doesn't work. You can't tell me. I mean, they must have made some really bad decisions in life to be in a position, or they're currently making bad decisions now.
Even I think that's a bit of a dramatic claim.
Yeah,
if a nurse earns something like 34 grand a year,
okay,
and
that's band 5. And that's going to be band 5, not band 7, because band 7s are like 50K.
Yeah, there's no need for you to use the food bank on that wage. Yeah. Ordinarily, there's no need.
Yeah.
So
when I hear that,
unless of course you're saying
that these things that are being reported on that leftist propaganda. Sorry, go on.
You can type this up in Google. You can and you'll get your answer. So,
what am I typing up? Am I typing up as somebody on 47K is in food bank? I don't care if someone on 47K is on food bank.
No,
I don't care if someone on 51,000 pounds is in a food bank. I don't care. So this is the problem.
Nurses earn 47K. So you think nurses earn 47K?
NHS band 5 is 35,000 pounds. I'm happy to check this one. So let me just quickly Google it. No. NHS AFC banding nurses, right? Nurses. Let's have a look. So the minimum one that you'd expect to see is 29,000 pounds. That's already at the average. So senior nurses that are moving on, newly qualified.
No, we're not talking about senior nursing. Okay. So I mean, on 29K,
30-something thousand pounds for me. I'm sorry, you shouldn't be in a food bank. I can't hear that.
No,
I know people on 30,000 pounds that are doing that. It's not the best life, but they're doing pretty well. Some of them have children, and they're still able to take care of themselves without going to food banks.
One second. I think again, this is so. If you happen to be a single parent, because the 29K that you're talking about,
someone that's in that situation,
right? Yeah, 1 second. Okay. So you're a single parent. You've got, I don't know, maybe a number of children who,
let's say one dependent child. Let's go with that. Yeah.
No. Okay. Let's say 2 kids.
Let's say one. No. Let's just start easy. Start with one, because single parent 2 kids. We're crossing into outliers here. Let's say one.
It's not an outlier. 2 is
most people have more than 1 kid.
I know, but single parent with 2 kids is generally pushing it. In most cases,
no.
Because I mean, okay, so if I go back to
single parent I know have more than 1 kid.
Okay, the replication rate in the UK is 2.1. So and that's including dual parents and single parents. You can't just throw.
I'm trying to give you a typical scenario of everyday life, right?
All right, I'll take it. Let's go.
Okay, so they've got two kids, right? And they're on 29, and they have to send these kids to school. Do you know how much it costs for childcare?
Yes, I know how much it costs, but I also know that they also get 30 hours free every week.
Nursery.
So that's 4 days.
Yeah, for nursery. For nursery, yeah. So that's just been increased recently, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was 2 days previously. Yeah.
Yes. So, but these kids are in school. She has to work, and it's shift work. and she has to send the kids to.
Okay, so is she single that there's no man at all contributing anything, or is it because
Yes,
in most cases
there are lots of women who don't.
That is
again we're really moving here to outliers. We're
No,
moving
we're
a
not.
lot
This
to
is not
outliers.
an outlier.
I've just
Well,
told you
it
now.
is because is the average is the
I've
average
just told
woman
you that this
is the
happens.
average so I'm sorry no wait hang on, is the average woman in the UK single woman with 2 kids who she has to pay for all of their bills together? Is that the average woman in the UK?
But people
I
don't
don't want
have
to talk
to
about
be
exception,
average. People don't have to be average for
but we're
that to be
talking in
common.
general.
No. For it to be a common scenario, right? It doesn't have to be average for it to be a common scenario. The scenario that Jab is painting to you is not far-fetched at all.
Okay. So can I just read this out? This is Nursing Times, okay? January 2023, just headlines. Charity reports more than 500 nurses using food banks, okay? NHS charities support food banks for the health workforce. It's York. This is on BBC. Food bank organizers say nurses and paramedics among users. You know, this is March 2024.
You're on mute.
Guardian. NHS trust providing or planning food banks for staff. So, I mean, this is I'm talking real life issues here. This happens. You've got to unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
I can't hear him either. He's just having a rant with himself.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Unmute yourself.
Carry on, Jab, while he sorts himself out. I think he can hear.
So yeah. So my point is that this is I'm not making up stories. There are nurses in the NHS who have to use food banks. So life is really very hard, and it's the reason why when I started making my comment, I said about I know again Nigerian, Ghanaian, Zimbabwean, nurses or people on
There we go.
Low pay who have to work 2-3 different jobs to make ends meet. In the days when one was younger and he used to go clubbing and all that kind of thing, you would see, students from African countries doing night shifts, down in the toilets and all of those kind of things, trying to make ends meet. So they have to work a number of shifts to work. So if success is strictly tied to the degree of hard work, we would not expect that these people are going to be lacking and having to use food bank. Is because it comes back to that value that we're talking about earlier. It's what we seek to prioritize, the values that we put on what's important in society. So
yeah,
it's not.
I mean, this is just propaganda. It's propaganda. No, you're literally giving propaganda now. It's propaganda. Because if you tell me that there's 500 nurses, right, that are currently using,
I didn't tell you. It's you can Google that. It's a fact. Nurses are using food banks.
Okay, but how many nurses do we have in the UK? Last time I checked, there were about 750,000 nurses. And if you've got 500 of them that are using food banks, I have to ask them questions about their life choices. And if the average nurse is earning over £30,000, there's a problem.
They are not. You just looked it up, and we just said to you, if a full-time nurse is earning 29K, that's what you just told us. That's full-time, right? And they've got 2 children, and they're a single parent.
On what band? What band are we looking at? Sorry, I missed it because I'm still struggling.
It doesn't matter. The lowest band there is 29.
Yeah, but that's the lowest. Is that the average? You're telling me the lowest, the worst possible paid nurse is on 29 grand?
You don't have to be the average nurse to be able to feed. The lowest should be able to feed. I suppose that's
but I'm saying even 29K. Even 29 grand, even 29,000 pounds is more than most people are earning in the UK. Well, not most, but it's more than at least 45% of people in the country. And 45% of people in the country are not starving on the streets. So for you to somehow characterize people on 29,000 pounds a year as being suffering and they have to go to food banks and they're dying and everything, it's like, come on. It's pushing this to a level of extremity that is just unnecessary. And to me, I think that this is even proof of value generally speaking, of what these people do. And then when we go back to the concept of fairness, because I really want to go back, because we've segued and we've diverted from the conversation slightly. We're talking initially about the value that's being provided by a lot of these influencers or these kind of people out there in the world. And the reality, when we come at this from an economic perspective, is that there are some people who provide more value than others. And these people provide the value that people pay for. If people are willing to utilize the hard-earned money, we talked about the planes, we talked about some of that stuff. Yes, I can inconvenience you by giving you a plane, a seat that's crunching up your leg. That's great. Congratulations. Go and use another airline if you don't want mine. Right? It's similar to something that is a service that I provide as an IT professional myself. Within my world, what I would provide is going to be, in some cases, what's called discovery. I could provide this to some people for free. Give an example. I would say, company, come in there, show me your IT landscape or your data landscape. Let's have a look at what you have. I'll look at what you have and I'm like, oh, okay. Actually, I've had a look at everything that you've got. You got this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem, that problem. To get the value of what I'm going to offer you based on what I've given you for free, pay. I could give them for free. I could give them my reduced price, that discovery process. So it's still about providing some value.
I think you have succumbed to this economic propaganda that, and I think where the propaganda, no, I tell you, it's economic propaganda. It's just pure propaganda. And the reason is I'm not disputing your economic principles, okay? So economics itself, just like value, is not outside of a vacuum. Economics, basically, at its most basic level, is looking at modeling people's behavior with regards to how they value things and what they're willing to give for it, right? Either at individual or collective levels. That's what economics does, okay? I'm not an economist, so don't drag me into more complex. I'm just telling you at the most sort of basic. Now, what I am saying to you is all of these disciplines, by nature, they are built on something else. So just the same way biology and chemistry is built on physics, biology on physics and chemistry. This is how it is. Economics is effectively built on psychology. So and the whole psychology of it is the value, what people put value. Economics doesn't study that at all. It just takes the value as a given, which is what you're doing.
No, but it doesn't.
No. Just bear with me. Let me.
But you're wrong. I mean, I'll bear with you, but you're wrong.
It's not its primary role to do that. Okay.
It is. It's part of economics.
Again, it's not its primary. Certainly not in the way that psychology does. So psychology will want to go down. It's not the same. Psychology.
What's the value of gold? What's the value of gold? What exactly is the value of gold? Or diamonds? Let's even use diamonds. I like diamonds. What's the value of diamonds?
Don't let us get sidelined from this.
It's a simple question. I just need one answer. One line.
It is whatever people are willing to pay for it.
Psychologically, which is based on a psychology.
Okay.
Diamond has value because of people's psychological.
So again, you use that word psychology there in the same way that I use economics. You're just using a word in a broad sense. So when I say physics, that's what it is. When I say chemistry is built on physics, it's just in a broad sense. That doesn't mean that I've told you everything about physics. I am now telling you that word value that you set out now in a psychology way of analyzing it totally different from economics, like totally different. It's not the same. I've taken classes in both of them. It's not even the same. Like that, and for good reasons. Like when a chemist is talking about lithium, they're not interested in what a physics is talking about it. Again, they're different disciplines. The one's built on the other, but they're doing the difference. And there's a reason for that. There's a concept of emergence that makes you don't need to go to a lower level of explanation once you're on a particular level, because it's irrelevant. What economics is doing is totally different from what psychology is doing. They don't have to start dabbling into each other.
Not really.
It is different. You have to take some things as a given. And what I am telling you is that the values come from, and that's what the video, I think it was Chidi who posted that video, who was talking about people who are able to tell stories. That's where the value comes from. And it's in, and those stories are not immutable. We can retell them. We can sit down in a room and tweak those stories. I'm not saying they're easy to do, they're not, but they are doable. So, that you can imagine a world where nurses have more value than they do today. It is doable. Okay, it's not a given that people who look after dying relatives of people should be barely living from paycheck to paycheck. It's not a given at all. It's because of the value that we ascribe to it, because of the way we tell the stories around it, and the way we hype the people who do, frankly, less important things. Again, this is the fact. I'm not even sure why anyone
It's not a
can't see
fact,
this.
because
It
what
is
you're
a
saying goes
fact.
against
It's
what
a
you're saying
fact.
goes no, it's not. You keep saying that, but what you're saying goes against all economic theory. And I'm talking about
It doesn't. Okay, let me
it
give you
does.
one
I can tell
example.
you
Let,
what.
let,
I
let
can
me
tell
give
you
you let,
why.
let me give you one example to think
Okay.
about this. So I'm a Manchester City fan, and I love the team. I've supported them for a long time, but I'm not this diehard. Will pay anything for anyone, and I still recognize that it's all a story we tell each other. You enjoy it, you feel good. I'm not too sucked into it, but I'm a fan. Okay, and all the time where players left us, when company left, we thought, oh, this is the best defender ever. We're never going to get anyone like this. Of course, we got Ruben Diaz. When Yaya Toure left, oh, we're never going to get anyone like this. We got
Yeah.
Kevin De Bruyne. And it just keeps going on and on and on. So that's the first point to make. The second one is that Manchester United, for example, are local rivals, right? These guys have been, and Manchester City as well, but they had their glory years in the past. They used to pay, there's a time in history of this country where these elite footballers, some of them were having to do part-time jobs to be able to play football. They weren't paid to the degree comparatively that they are today, but the passion was exactly the same. Their commitment was exactly the same. The local fanaticism was exactly the same. What has happened? Let me tell you what has happened now.
They're more
That's
valuable.
making them no, they're not more valuable.
They're literally more valuable.
They're not more valuable. Sky, the media machine, has found a way to make money off that industry. That's all that has changed. That is all that has changed.
Before Sky, before God, before 200 years ago. Let's go back 200 years ago. Actually, 120 years ago. We'll deal with what's the guy's name? Howard Hughes. What was his value when there was no propaganda machine? Let's even go a little bit further beyond that. Let's go into the past a little bit, and then we'll talk about Thomas Edison is a good example. It's like, well, what was his value?
Made that example, yeah.
Yeah.
He
What was his value?
He invented the light
He
bulb,
didn't. He
right?
stole. Theoretically, I mean, the current argument is, don't hold me on this, whoever is watching, but the current argument has on conspiracy theories almost, but the current argument is that he stole that from Nikola Tesla. He stole that idea.
Fine.
Yeah. So
he may have stolen it from Elon Musk.
Yeah, but somebody else did the work, and then he died a pauper, right? Because Tesla died broke, and then Edison ended up becoming a household name, and then
but he didn't have any money though.
Edison,
certainly not compared with people who are inventing things that are not even near what he invented.
Yeah, but again, we can go around the future and everything because in my mind, Edison did not actually do anything. What did he do? He just took ideas and he turned them into profitability. He put them in people's hands. He said, "Do you want a thing?" And then people say yes. And then the question is how much. And this is where we're coming back to fairness, because this question about fairness, which is there that we're talking about, what does fairness even mean? It's about fairness in my mind. It's about whether or not people want a thing. If people don't want your thing, doesn't matter how useful your thing is. If people don't want it, it doesn't matter. There's no value in that thing, and I can't expect you to treat me fairly. If the work I'm putting and the effort I'm putting into a thing that I really value, I can value all I want. If people don't want it, it doesn't mean anything. All these. So if you look at the airlines, I'll just use this final example, and I'll pass it back to you. If you look at the airline,
can I make a comment then?
Just before that, I'll pass on the torch at this point. But if you look at the airline question I was raised already earlier, airlines make things really cramped. And if people didn't care about being cramped, all that would happen is they would lose the next tier. It's going to be empty because people didn't value more space. People didn't value better food. People didn't value more particular service.
So you're making my point whilst pretending to ignore it, right? That this value is carefully crafted. There's a manipulation going on.
Yeah, but you keep talking about government. Is the government one? I'm like, what?
No. So there's a clear attempt to manipulate the value, to manipulate it, to make people value it. There's a clear attempt. That's what you're describing. There are people in the boardroom.
Everybody does that.
Yes.
Everybody does it.
Yes, we all do it, and that's why I'm
even
saying
doctors have overtime.
Everybody doesn't do that.
The point of overtime.
Let me chip in
The point
here.
of overtime is that I'm scarce and I'm giving you stuff. If you want to have me here, I'm going to take 2 times the overtime or 2 times the value of my day because I'm more valuable on these days and these hours. I've got out of hours calls that you'd have. Why? Because I'm more valuable. You're asking me to come to do something that I don't want to do. Therefore, I'm giving you an additional cost. We all do this as humans. It's a funny thing that when we look at this, like women relationships, men do this all the time in relationships as well. We are naturally inclined to do this.
I am not saying again, my argument about it is amoral. I am not making a moral argument about it. I'm just recognizing that it exists and that then becomes a window of opportunity for us to think and rethink this things because we can see it.
What are you replacing it with?
We can.
With what?
I'll explain. Let Job speak. I'll explain. Of course we can.
Okay.
You can't, but go on, Job.
No, so I think okay, so it comes back to values again. And how do you determine values? Values can be, let's say, religious. You might say that, we believe in God and this is what God wants us to do, and therefore we're deriving that value from here. In the capitalist system, the thing that drives the value, to my mind, majorly is profit making. So when you take the example of the airline that you talked about there, what's driving that idea of making life a little bit uncomfortable for the normal, ordinary, baseline economic class passenger? It's because of profit, because you've worked out if you make it a bit cramped, people are going to want to pay a bit more to get into the business class. That's what's driving it. It's not because...
Why are you thinking about it like that rather than thinking about the other way of saying that I've done the barest minimum to have you be able to survive this trip without breaking your legs. Now, if you want more than that, I can increase your comfort, but with an additional cost. Why are you looking at the other way around and saying I'm going to reduce the comfort? It's like because generally it's not that. Most of these planes and organizations start with a base level of comfort.
Question, let me answer.
Okay.
No, because I can point you to 100 billion examples. That is what drives the capitalist system, right? It's profit making. It is profit making. That's the reason we had the slave trade was profit. The reason we had colonialism is profit. The reason Africa, why we've got neo-colonialist system operating at the moment, it's profit. It's all follow the money. Everything is going to make sense.
You've not answered my question. That's not my question.
Let's rope in the third. Let's rope in the third section as you guys go back and forth on this. But just try to incorporate the idea of meritocracy into whatever you're saying now, as to how do you keep things going, whilst at the same time making sure everyone has what they want. Should we even bother at all, or should we just let the rich just make whatever economics they can make of anything?
No. So in my worldview, I think that I am happy with free enterprise, whatever that means. I am happy if people are allowed to use. So first of all, I think that certain sectors of the economy really ought to be in public hand. I don't want the government making cups or shoes or stuff like that. You can leave that in private enterprise, right? But I think things like, let's say,
are they allowed to make uncomfortable shoes?
to punish the poor, so that hardworking meritocrats like Cross can enjoy their proper shoes and pay money for it.
They're bespoke shoes. This soft one with foam inside.
Okay, well, you get the point I'm making. The point I'm making is I think that certain sectors should stay in government hand. We have seen what's happened with water. We've seen what's happened with railway system in the UK, for instance. So I think that, but the point, I think, I don't know if it was here I mentioned this. Capitalism, I would say, allows a society to generate wealth and no, this is heavily caveated, but it's heavily caveated. But please, because of where I'm going, I don't want to go into the specific caveats. But so capitalism allows us to generate wealth, but I think, which is good. But I think we also need a system that then redistributes the wealth. And
which in fact we do have, but I suspect the point you're making is that where we've set the balance isn't right. Because we do have a system, we have a benefit system. It's just the balance doesn't feel right.
That's correct. But you see, as well as that, when you talk about benefit system, because I think a lot of people kind of think, when you talk about distribution, people kind of feel like, oh, you're going to just take my money and give it to this guy who is just lazing around and doesn't do anything. But if you have a socialist system, the roads that we have, that's a socialist project, because you're doing it for everybody. You don't say only some people can use that road, other people can't use it, right?
In fact, I'll go as far as say the children born of the struggling single mothers who they raised through sweat and blood, who ended up working in your huge mega factory to generate wealth for you, are a product of our collective investment in your company. There's no chance. You've got no chance without these people.
What does that mean? Okay.
You've got no chance.
Should we pay all?
No. Let me explain the point that I'm making. So in as much as right, sorry.
But let me land. Okay, so that's just one area, So you can look at transport. So what we want basically is like a world-class transport system, education system, health system, all of these things. It all depends about it's all about what kind of society do you want. If you want healthy, well-educated society, people are not worrying about where light is coming and water and all of those things.
Then you need capitalism.
So it's all about redistribution of wealth and providing these public facilities, because you are going to get a better society, and a better society works for everybody, right? So I am just totally against the situation where because if you don't regulate capitalism, right, what you're going to end up with is this pyramid system that is just so terrible, where wealth, as it is today in America, right, where maybe, I don't know, 100 people or whatever have as much wealth as the bottom 350 million people. It's just not right.
Yeah.
That's system.
So whilst I agree with Job in principle, and I think that has been clear from the beginning of this discussion, I think there's a slight point of departure there, which is a very slight thing. It doesn't change, how we, but I think it changes just how I look at it and what my expectations are. I don't think it's a given, actually, that we get a better society. It depends on what better means. And I think my agreement with you is in principle, and it's a value judgment that I make, irrespective of whether it lands us into what someone else might describe as a better society. Because I think that term better actually...
To answer that question, a better society means that, a woman goes to hospital, she is not bleeding to death because there's very top obstetric care, right? You're having a heart attack,
so specific outcomes,
and get the treatment, right? People are not having accidents because the potholes all over the place.
So I agree we should be able to provide that.
Your citizens are well educated, right? So it's that's what I mean by a better society.
So and my take on this, again, I totally agree with that. I'm totally aligned on that. My view about this is that you, as you did state very clearly at the start, Jab, that we're not, there's no level playing field. Okay, it doesn't exist, and even it's so profound because people say you can get people often. I suspect you might get cross to agree that there's no level playing field, but then you might struggle to get them to agree to the next thing I'm going to say, which I think is even more profound. So there's no level playing field to begin with, and there will never be level playing field, no matter what you do. right? So you can rechannel the wealth with whichever formula you choose. You're still not going to create a level playing field. And I think that's where the despair of people like Cross come in here, because they think it's obvious to them to see, and I can see it as well, that if you take all the money from the billionaires and you channel it to, some of the strugglers and the drug addicts, all you'll create is
But that's not what we're doing, though. I'm not arguing for that.
No. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying what people fear on the other side.
That's what you're arguing for. You just don't realize it. You're arguing
No. I'm not even saying that's what you're arguing for.
I know you're not saying. I'm saying that.
When I've had this conversation with people, this is what they worry about. That you take all the money and you give it to these people, and all you get is just less money from the billionaires, and these people squander it anyway.
More money on crap.
But I put it to you that if that's what you're worried about, then you're thinking about this wrongly. The reason why I say you're thinking about it wrongly is the aim isn't to create a level playing field. It will never exist, because inequalities, the inequalities they're dynamic, they exist, they will never go away. Our attempt, and the fact that they will never go away, should not make us fall into this fatalistic position that because I can't make it perfect, then I can't make it, I'll give up from trying to make it better, which is the trap that I think a lot of people fall into, whereas they say you make the good the enemy of the best, right? The point I'm putting to you is you have a society where some people suffer a lot, okay? And some people have way more than anybody realistically needs. Right. This is clear. This is clear for us to see.
Please pause there a second. If you've got 10 million pounds, right? If you've got 10 million pounds, and I give you another 10 million pounds, I don't think that is going to improve your life in any sense.
Because you don't have 10 million pounds, so you also understand what the 10 million pound person is feeling.
Let me land.
It's similar to the issue. Go on.
But please let me land.
Go on.
It's not going to improve your life in any significant way. However, if I have somebody like the example of the nurse that we're talking about who has to use a food bank, and if I don't want to use money because I don't want people to think that it's all about money, but let's assume that her salary goes up from, let's say, 29 to, let's say, all conditions remain the same, 60 or 70. That is going to improve that person's life dramatically.
It may
in a big way, in a major transformative way.
She might just end up buying Gucci bags as well.
Exactly.
So this is the problem with this, and I tell you this in all honesty. She might just end up spending some of it on Gucci
she's
bags.
What? Sorry.
So she might just end up spending some of it on Gucci bags as well. You can't rule out her just spending some of it buying some Gucci bags.
Spending on what? Sorry.
Gucci bags.
Jab, you need to log back in. I think
no.
Your thing is cutting it in and out.
No. The reason this woman.
Oh, you're back. Nope. Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is economics. So I mean, you've crossed over to economics now. There's a specific for this. It's called MPC, marginal propensity to consume. So it really is focused on how much you earn. How much do you earn and how much do you spend? It doesn't matter how much you earn. People have an ability to save regardless of what it is that they earn. There's also something called autonomous consumption, which is basically the absolute minimum that you need to actually consume to survive. 1 second. Let's pull Jab back into it. There's an absolute minimum. It's called autonomous consumption that you need to survive. Outside that, everything else is marginal propensity to consume. And I know that some people, we're probably going to see some comments. I can see some people on there. I imagine they're going to have some interesting thoughts about this as well. And they're going to have very similar views. But people spend proportionally to their income. So if you're earning 30K and then you switch your income, somehow you do some massive thing to £300,000. If of your 30K, let's assume your autonomous consumption was half, your 15K was what was left. So let's assume that, because that becomes your actual income. Of your 15K, you spent all of it to save nothing.
Disposable income.
Well,
Cross,
yeah,
hang on.
all of this.
No, no,
Wait,
no.
because I think it's
No,
important. It's not.
I don't like
Wait,
I don't
Jab,
like
wait,
theory.
wait,
No,
Jab, wait.
I'm not.
See,
Let
this
him
is
let him
important.
No,
let him
my
land.
point is
Let
this.
him
Jab, this is
let him land.
important.
Let him land, Job. Let him land, Job.
Yeah.
Let him land.
So if people spend 100% of their 15K that's left after the autonomous consumption, right? If you 10x their income and they move on from the 30K to 300K, all that's going to happen is they're going to move from the Vauxhall, Astra to dealing with a G-Wagon or whatever. They're going to spend 100%.
I agree with you on this, but I would
Okay.
still say they deserve it.
So please pause.
I agree
Pause.
with you.
Okay, pause. You know, when I gave the example of the millionaire and I said he's got 10 million, and if you double his money, it's not going to make much of a difference. And you were like, no, that's not correct, right? But you're making the same argument now, which is that he's probably going to end up spending the rest of that money on frivolous things.
New yacht.
Why do you
New
think it's
mansion.
frivolous?
Yeah.
Is it because it's frivolous to you?
And
Because frivolous to them? So, because the thing that you spend on, there's some people right now on 12K that think that what you spend on are frivolous. Do you know what I mean? You cannot pick that frivolous based on your perception about what's frivolous or not.
Give me a chance to answer it. Which is this? I have given you an example of a woman.
It's showing you his muscle. That's all it's doing.
No, sorry. No,
but I'm talking about a single parent who's a nurse with 2 kids, and because of her situation, no help from anywhere, they are now going to a food bank. And I'm saying, if you double that salary, my point is, very likely she is not going to want to go to. She's not going to need to use a food bank now. Someone else will take her place.
Do you need to change?
Right?
And this is the question that's there, and this is the prompt. Do we change the salaries
of
all nurses? Is it all of them, or just the ones that have 2 kids that are single moms? Is it all of them? This is the question I'm posing to you, because I know that you're more communistic than I am. I know that you have your own view, and we clash on this because I am certainly far more capitalistic.
You are a capitalist economist, and all your economic, you are.
So I think my problem is you need to give me
100% capitalist. I'm not 100% capitalist
because you're not letting me make the point.
No, but no, because I get it, but I want to segue it because I'm also looking at the clock as well. But I just want to segue it into, well, let's get back to the point of the conversation that at this point, should we change it? And if so, how? So are we saying that all nurses, or is it some nurses? Are we saying the nurses that have got 2 kids that are single, that we change their income? Or are we doing it for all of them? What is the barometer that we're dealing with here? How do we determine what fair is? Currently, fair is based on value.
My own, I have a definition for what fair is. Okay,
we are discussing a society. What kind of society do you want to have? And I've already explained.
I don't have a society where someone is earning.
You will get.
Go on. Sorry. Go on.
Okay. So my point is that you have to determine. So it goes back to the value system that we're talking about. And I was saying, in the capitalist system, the value is determined by profit making and profit seeking. And that is why you have an oligarchic system, but which we conveniently call a democracy, because there is nothing democratic about a system that allows a few people to concentrate wealth right at the top, and the people at the bottom have to scrounge for the living.
But because people vote for it and they choose for it. There's a free market and they choose that.
Please let me land. So the difference, the reason we can even boast of, let's say, things like the NHS and services like that is because of that socialist system that people don't want to hear about. It is kind of a socialist project. So if you went to a place like Nigeria that is maybe perhaps that is absent, you are going to have a system where if you don't have money, you are in trouble because you're not going to be able to get these simple things like, basic healthcare. Or you can even take America right across the street, just upon there. It's a nearly 30 trillion economy, and people can't afford basic healthcare. So that is a system that happens when you've got unregulated capitalism, because it's all about profit seeking. And it is that determines the value. It's the reason why the singer that you're talking about can generate that much, income, whereas a nurse is having to use a food bank. So what kind of society do we want? So we've got this, we need to now think about this distribution, okay? Redistribution. That's where that comes in. And I'm not talking about just a nurse. We need to determine and say, right, in this instance, we've got nurses who are having to, by the way, childcare. So if you want them to work, and then you want her out of that 29,000 per annum to still afford school childcare, it's just not going to work. And that's another reason. And it's another reason why people end up saying
she has 4 days. Well, she has 4 days.
It doesn't make.
And why is she single?
1 second. It does not make economic sense.
Please, why is she a single mom? Why are we talking about single moms? Why? Shouldn't we push them
I am describing
families?
Please let me land. Please, I'm describing real life situation. So that situation is kind of what makes some people to say, well, it's not worthwhile because I've got 2 kids. All the money that I get as salary, I'm now using it to pay for childcare. It's not worth it. So I'm just going to go on benefit. These are real life issues that I'm describing here. That is what happens. So, but if we have a system where we develop these social services, so I've mentioned healthcare, but maybe like people do in Scandinavia, you get creche which are very well staffed, and kids can have food there, and it's all warm. If you do that, then you might get women who can spend a bit more time, and if you meet people's basic social needs, right, and this woman does not have to go to the food bank. If these basic needs are met, then it doesn't really matter if somebody's earning 29K, as long as that money can now go
can I just do
other things to help the economy grow. So I'm not against somebody going to buy a bag and all of those things, because that also helps to keep the economy growing.
Can I just infuse something into this conversation, Jab? Because I think I take the point you're making. I think is a reasonable point, but I think you're missing something out of the equation as well, which I'm trying to play the devil's advocate here, which I think Cross may thank me a little bit for, because I suspect it's one of the points he's been trying to make. But I think you're removing something from the equation in the way that I think Cross is removing what you're putting in the equation. I think what you're removing from the equation is the factor of personal choices as well. I think you are making this direct leap between
I don't know if you can hear me, but you are on my end. You are really cutting.
I'm not sure. Cross, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll try again. But what I think you're taking out of the equation, or at least not accounting for enough, is personal choices. So I think you're making this leap between, if we provide all of this stuff, what we will get is adults who make good choices, and they'll be able to structure their lives, and that's not always correct. I think even just looking practically in life, sometimes if you give more easily, you create systems of disincentive, basically. And I've seen this in real life. And I'm not saying that's a reason I'm not saying. So sorry?
You can say that about the billionaire.
Yes.
You can say the same thing about the billionaires.
No, absolutely, which is why I am not making this argument of. Exactly. That's why I am not making this argument of a better society. I'm saying this as a matter of social justice, right? It doesn't matter what people end up using the money to buy. Okay, there's no reason why one person should have so much more than the other.
Yeah, because they earned it.
You see, this is why I'm making end of. So it doesn't
because
matter.
They earned it. They earned it. It's their money.
Can I land? Even if the nurse ends up using her money to buy Gucci bag, fair and square. That's what the billionaire uses his money to buy anyway. Yeah. So the point I am making. So when you say they earned it, again, I think you're becoming a trap of all of this, your economic knowledge. The reason is it doesn't address where the value comes from in the first place. I'm telling you that value comes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So economics starts from the point that the value is there, right? This is so
No,
people.
no,
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 no, no,
no,
no, no,
no,
no.
no,
It
no,
doesn't
no, no, no.
address.
No.
Uh,
So in economics, value is always, it's always extrinsic, even though
We're
there's
on one.
lots of different
We're on 1
theories.
hour. I think maybe we should start to think about rounding up, guys.
Yeah, we can start thinking about that. But I need to address this one. In economics, value is always extrinsic. So if you think about the actual currency that we use, it's all fiat, which is basically government saying this money has power. That's the proof that value is what we ascribe to it. Value, money, things in themselves don't
so,
mean
so
anything. It's what people agree.
everything you're saying, just proves the point I'm making, that you have no
That
idea about what value actually means. This is an economics perspective, which is correct. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's so economics, it doesn't even touch on what value means. And you keep saying that it does. It doesn't. You're not even dealing with the meaning of value at all. You're just, again, this is why cross-discipline discussion sometimes can be very interesting. So you have a physicist and a biologist. You're just talking past each other because one's just talking about DNA, and another one's talking about something more fundamental than that, which is where it becomes difficult. No, seriously, and that's exactly what
yeah.
you're doing. So you're just everything you're saying is just proving the point I've made, which is that economics
What's
doesn't
that
deal
point?
with, which is that economics doesn't even scratch the surface of what the value means. So
Okay.
it's telling you, and it doesn't have to,
Let me try
because
again
no, it doesn't
for
even
the last
have to.
time.
It doesn't have to,
Just
because if it does, it will no longer be economics, it'll be psychology. It
no, but
doesn't.
it's economics. Let me try one last time, hopefully, because I mean I know Jab just pointed out the clock. But value is what people ascribe to a
Yes.
thing.
So
That's all that it is.
yes, that's all. No, that's all that it is. Yes, just like
That's all.
all that DNA is the double helix that carries information. That's all that it is. But give that same thing to a more
So I want to
fundamental
convert
science.
it
If
to
they will
no,
reduce it,
but,
they will reduce
I
it to
want
something
I
else
want to
again.
convert this into a socio-cultural
Right.
perspective as well, because as an economist, you have to deal with socio-culturalism. So as a society, we tend to ascribe value to things. And then this is one of the reasons why, for example, if you're going to sell pork in a Muslim society, it's going to be pretty damn expensive because one is banned and two, people don't want it. So the people that want it,
It might cost you your life as well.
exactly. So it's going to be one goddamn expensive thing for me to bring you some pork.
So the
But
value
then if
in
you
that
go into
case,
Tesco here,
but
so
the
the
value
value is
in that,
significantly higher because
no,
socioculturally,
Again,
the
what
value.
you're doing is just explaining the phenomenon without, and there's no need to. So I'm
No,
not
but
sure
no,
why
but,
we're
but
hung up on
I'm
this.
explaining the why. I'm explaining the why. Is the why
There's
I'm
no why
focusing on.
there. There's the economic why that you're explaining, not the
No,
psychological why.
no.
Did you not get the difference?
I'm talking about psychological why, and I'm combining it with the sociocultural. So, in terms of if we think about, let's go back to the Taylor Swift one. I'm going to just quickly just round it up because I've probably been going pretty
Yeah,
detailed and breaking this down.
1.5 minutes each now, so that we can
Yeah,
finish.
so fundamentally, the thing about this is that people get some kind of psychological satisfaction, pleasure, joy, some sort of panacea from a lot of these interactions. So from musicians, etc., whether they idolize them, whether they feel certain things from them, etc., they get some things, whether it's dopamine, whether it's serotonin. I don't know what it is that they get because it's different feelings that they get from different people. And then when they get them, it doesn't change the fact that they want more of them. It's similar to the example I just tried to give of the trying to buy pork in Dubai or in Saudi Arabia. You just you want that thing, and there are multiple reasons why you want that thing. They want Taylor Swift for multiple different reasons, although the reasons tend to fall within a bunch of different small categories, but they still want that. And the more people that want a thing, the more you can increase the price of that thing. Do you want to travel? Yes, I'm going to move. I'm going to reduce your seats to the point that it becomes not worth traveling because it's too uncomfortable. And then you won't do that because I have more seats, more, etc., all that kind of thing around the place. This is the issue that we need to understand. At the end of the day, the world is not fair. The world is more about the creation of opportunity, the creation of value for others who are willing to pay for it. And the more you're willing to pay for something that has value, the less you're going to get. And that's just the reality of the situation in life.
Okay, Job.
See.
Final words.
Okay, so I think so there is no, in my view, there's no level playing field, and this would start from the very moment the cells of our parents and our mother join together to form that little embryo that will become a fetus at birth, because people can inherit, let's say, faulty genes, for instance, and that itself puts you straight away at a disadvantage. You know, you're born in one country or maybe one part of the world, you just automatically inherit disadvantages. Your parent might be an alcoholic, or one parent is in prison. That itself again is a disadvantage. So there is no level playing field. And so for me, the purpose of government has to be the greatest good for the most number of people, and that is in recognition of these inherent deficiencies, on equal terrain that we inherit, I would say, actually. And so the idea that some people are self-made, I think it's problematic, and this is not an argument in itself against hard work, but we have to recognize that just for the sake of emphasis again, that the ground is uneven, and the purpose of government really is to redistribute wealth. We want a society that is, I don't want to use the word fair, but I think that, like I explained earlier, we're here for a very short time. We want everybody to have as good an experience, as humane as an experience as possible. So that's the way I would approach this this subject. So it's about wealth distribution, I think.
I would say, I agree with both of you. There's no level playing field. I would go further to say there will never be level playing field. I take the concerns that both of you have raised. I think fundamentally we should aspire, and government should be driving this, to produce a society where there's less inequalities, particularly at the lower ends, and people are able to access things that are life-saving, life-prolonging, and lead to various degrees of human flourishing. But I also accept Cross's argument about incentives and where to set them, and I don't think if you give people more access to resources, it always makes their lives necessarily better. But I would say that is still not an argument not to do it, because it's, for me, an issue of social justice. There's no reason why some people should have that much more than others, whatever each end up doing with it. I think they all have a right to it. And to go just finally about the issue of values, and I think we can get stuck on that all day. It seems clear to me that there's a dichotomy of principles here, where with regards to fundamentally addressing a subject cross-discipline. And I've seen it with other debaters, where people talk past each other because they're approaching a particular subject from different disciplines. When psychology and anthropology talk about values, it's in a different context to economics.
Yeah.
Very different, very different. And it doesn't make one more legitimate than others. It's different ways of analyzing the same principle, and you see it very commonly. When a chemist is talking about water, is different from when a spring water manufacturing company is talking about. They're two different things, right? But they're both correct. And I think we'll have that conversation another day. But in a sense, I think all of us agree that there's no fairness And in some sense, we need to make it a bit fairer. I think where we kind of disagree slightly is where the thresholds are. Fantastic conversation in my view. I think we should do this again with Farouk, and perhaps, I think because it's Eid al-Kabir today, I suspect that we might have had less engagement overall with Farouk not being here, and there might be even maybe slightly less people watching as well. So it's one to think about rerunning again.
I mean, I think it's interesting for us to talk about values. I think it'd be good for us to really talk about what values are
Yeah.
and what they mean, because that
Yeah.
deconstructs this conversation that we're having.
No,
But yeah, I mean, it's been good.
absolutely, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm just saying
I
you're
know
right.
it's just different perspectives. So maybe we
Yes,
need
you're
to talk
right
about
in a
that a little
certain
deeper.
paradigm. What you're not saying is that there's a paradigm beyond that, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it is what it is.
Let's do that. I think we should definitely do that. I needed to give. There's a comment that came into my my messages, and I just wanted to read it out. And I think
Right.
it kind of encapsulates exactly what I've been saying, which is give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime.
I don't think you can make that argument for a hardworking nurse who's been to university,
who's earning over on average. The bottom is just at average.
They're not being given fishes. They earned every fish that it's one of the hardest, most productive work anybody can do in this life. I can tell you that. I work with nurses.
I think it is hard, and I think it is productive.
It's not just hard.
I don't think it's one of the most.
Okay.
I just don't agree with that.
One of those. Let's not say one of the most. One of those tough jobs that are also extremely productive. Extremely, like I can't think. Extremely productive.
Not productive. Probably extremely restorative.
Extremely productive in my view.
Restorative, not productive.
They
don't produce.
This is the domain of values we're delving into.
We need a full-on session to talk about these values. I think we need one just to go values.
Yes, and I think even we can do this informally. We don't have to. We don't have to do a show on that. But I would like to have a discussion with you on values. I think it's very interesting because as we've had the conversation today, you almost felt that I was disagreeing with what you're. No, I agree with what you're saying. In fact, it's because I agree with what you're saying that I'm telling you.
Higher level above.
No, it's not. It's not even a higher level. It's a lower level because economics. So it's actually a lower. It's a more basic level. Economics is a sort of higher level, and but if you think about it at higher and lower, it doesn't even matter. So what you're thinking about, there's a concept, and we can talk about jobs gone. So we can take another 10 minutes to talk about this very briefly. So what it is that there's a concept called, and I suspect you've heard about it before, called emergence.
Okay, emergence.
And yes, emergence. And what emergence is that, just put it crudely, right? Is that you have a number of things come together, right? And they produce characteristics that you wouldn't have predicted from
the combination of
individual from the individual. So, for example, you get oxygen and hydrogen, right? Yeah. They're both gases, and you put 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen together, and it becomes water. And it behaves totally different from both hydrogen and oxygen.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's partly this principle of emergence that also creates different disciplines. Okay. So, for example, psychology would look at how people think, their emotions, feelings, behaviors on an individual level.
Yeah.
Sociology will take that and look at how they behave in groups.
Yep.
2 different disciplines. Okay, and both of them can sit down here and be arguing about the same word. It will mean different things. And the reason is and often you don't have to even understand what the other person is saying to make your own, because you've moved to a different way of analyzing the issue.
Yeah.
And this is what you get again with psychology and economics. It's very clear from everything you're talking about values. It's just reinforcing it that you're just in a different world. It doesn't make it wrong. It's a different.
It just makes
paradigm.
it different.
and because the questions you're trying to address they're different questions, so
let's end the pod and then we can carry on having this
yeah,
conversation
so the
backstage.
science becomes a different type of science, and that's what happens. And it is what it is. And what I am saying to you, I'll end by this, is that it is clear that you're not interested in the nitty-gritty of how value is born and crystallized.
Oh, I'm
matter.
interested. I'm interested. It's just that my background is a different scientific background.
That's what I'm saying.
So you need to show me. You need to you need to show me a different way of thinking, because the way I think about it is a very structured scientific method that's based on it.
No. Again, you say it's a structured scientific method. No, it's a structured economics method.
Economics is science. I have a BSc in economics.
No, that's what I'm. That's what I'm saying.
It's scientific. I use the scientific method.
You're not getting what I'm saying. I'm not saying economics is not a science. It's one scientific method.
That's exactly my point. And then it's like, okay, I need to get exposed to the other one, which you're going to expose me to say, okay, hang on, have you thought about it like this? And it's like, well, okay, okay, I've not thought about that, because you've already said some things that made me start questioning, the ideas about what I was saying, because I was explaining value, and then you kept pushing it to a different perspective and different thoughts.
Yes,
and I'm
because
like, okay,
because the value is not a given; it can be manipulated. And this is exactly what I'm saying to you.
We can. I think we need a whole. We need a whole. We need a
whole
pod on this one. This one is
be manipulated.
Because what you're saying encompasses things from economics, politics, sociology,
absolutely,
sociocultural.
You have to borrow a little bit from all of this.
Yeah,
and then you realize that the values itself can be manipulated.
I don't necessarily agree with that. And this is the thing; it's quite difficult.
Can be. This is not even in doubt. It can be.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying it is easy. I'm not saying it's easy to do.
That's why I was slow to say I don't necessarily, because it's a very difficult dynamic to be able to say that because there's so many different factors that we can talk about. Like, we've already talked about a couple of them already as we've been having this conversation now, and we've gone through a few different dynamics, and then within these different dynamics, we've jumped all over the shop. So I think we need to go back to the basis of understanding what the definition is first of value. So we start with that, and then we can work up the different.
We do this all the time. I'll give you examples. We do this all the time. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very difficult, but it is doable. And once you begin to think outside of the economics box of what values entail in a deeper psychological sense.
This is usually sorry, because we still have people that are watching us. I'm going to say this is what we talk about backstage after the actual podcast. So I think we should end it, and we can carry on a little bit in the back, in the back, and then we'll create a new topic, and then we'll see what it is. But yeah, I mean, do you want to sign off?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. I think we've had an interesting conversation, and almost began to think about what we could do next or at some other time. But join us again next week. I'm sure we'll have something very interesting again, and perhaps even a fuller house.
Signing off. Misaligned.
Cheers.